Welcome to another episode of Stories from the Edge of Life. We once again have Dr. Murali Naidu. Welcome again.
Thanks, Dr. Bharadwaj. Great to be here. Nice to see you.
Great. Would you mind introducing yourself to our audience one more time?
Absolutely. So my background is as a general surgeon. I practiced for several years in the Northeast, as well as in the San Francisco Bay Area. And over the past several years, I've transitioned into healthcare administration. So I have unfortunately put my scalpel down, but by the same token, I still have a way to take care of people. It's just a different way now.
Great. And I'm Parag Bharadwaj. I'm a hospice and palliative medicine physician. So you mentioned the scalpel, and this whole channel is about the edge of life. So tell us about, what did you learn about life from your experience? Did you notice, any change in your personality, your outlook on life as you practiced as a surgeon?
You can't do something like surgery and probably, any practice of medicine without it having an impact on yourself, but also on your outlook for life. And as I think back over the patients that I've had the privilege to take care of, there are certainly patients that really caused me to pause. And it's interesting because at the same time, you see how fragile life is, but also how incredibly strong and resilient the human body and humans are, right? And so you have the incredible extremes of people who come in with what is potentially a life-ending event, and we help them get through that. We fix whatever it was that put them there, and that the psychological trauma that people experience, families experience, but still hang in there, stick together, and come out the other side is unbelievable, and certainly has an impact on my own outlook for life. And then the other side of it is, how easily this amazing system, the human body, is, and how you can really tip it over when bad things happen. So it's just been, boy, just a fascinating educational ride, and it doesn't end. And how has it changed me? I would say every day I try to think about what I can do better. And that was true when I was a surgeon, also practicing surgery. What is it that I can do to make my surgery, make the procedure better for the patient, more efficient, more precise? And how do I do a better job taking care of people outside of the operating room? So those are the things for me that I would say have really been lasting impacts.
Great. Anything in particular that strikes you when it comes to what you learn from your patients? Because they are the ones that, needed the treatment and went through the procedure, right? I think because as a surgeon, you're in a very unique position because the body always has it's trying to protect itself from the external environment. And, the largest organ we have is the skin. And the surgeon, breaks that barrier to save the patient's life. So anything in particular that struck you when it comes to learning things from patients?
So many things. I want to touch on what you were saying there about breaking the skin barrier. Make no doubt about it, surgery is trauma to the human body, and that's it is well-intended trauma, but it is a very traumatic event. And we've seen the clinical science advance tremendously so that we reduce the impact of that trauma, which results in better surgical outcomes. But nonetheless, it's a big deal to break that skin barrier. In terms of what I've learned from people, it really is about being resilient. And, it's watching families come together in times of crises. And, we're all in that way at our core the same. I had some amazing experiences taking care of people in California's Central Valley who barely had enough to keep the roof over their heads and food on the table. And their the way they came together, the way they took care of family and each other during these times of crises was amazing. And by the way, no different than when I was on Manhattan's Upper East Side, taking care of people who had net worths that one couldn't count in a lifetime if one tried. And so, to me, I would say the biggest overarching lesson is we gotta remember we're all people, and it doesn't matter who you are, how famous you are, what you have, what you don't have. We're just all people, and that's true. And you see that in these times where people's lives are in a crisis, when they've got something bad happening from a healthcare standpoint. That's one of those moments where you see that we're all people.
Great perspective there. Now, in the OR, the operating room, surgeons take the lead in directing what's going on. Some tend to call surgeons as being control freaks. Sorry if I don't mean to offend anybody. I think certain amount of control is required because somebody has to be in charge when the operation or the surgery is being performed. But when you come out of the operating room, how do you balance that with your personal life? Because the outside world can be pretty chaotic, and it's not as designed as an operation room is.
Well, thank goodness that our entire lives aren't just like an operating room, because you're right, it's a very controlled environment most of the time. And when it's not controlled in the operating room, everyone is working to get it back into control, because that's what ultimately will lead to the best outcome for the person that's lying on the table. The thing about it is that we've made tremendous advances in surgery and in healthcare broadly around flattening the hierarchy, making sure that everybody in that operating room can raise their hand at any time and say, I have a concern about what's happening. Can we just take a pause and make sure that we're doing the right thing? Because we've seen through other examples, and the airline industry is an excellent one, hierarchies can be actually very dangerous if you've got a situation where that means somebody is assumed to always have the right answer. It means that the other many pairs of eyes that are involved in the situation take a back seat, and sometimes that means that if you're dependent on one person seeing everything, they miss something, right? And that's true in the operating room as well. By the same token, and again, I think the airline analogy holds true here, sometimes you've got to make a decision, you've got to make it fast, and you've got to move forward. And that's definitely true in the operating room. So I share all that because it's essential to learn the skill of when is it time to make a decision, because time is of the essence and we've got to move forward. And when is it not? And the shift in balance when you walk out of the room between those 2 points falls more to the latter. So how do I manage that? Look, it's something you've got to learn, and it's something that I've got to learn, and it's an everyday thing because it also varies based on the situation and, truthfully, how anybody's feeling at any given moment, right? When you're tired and stressed, sometimes it's hard to not say, I just want things this way. And so it's a constant learning experience. And I imagine if you were to bring my family into the room here and ask them, and presumably you don't have them behind a screen there, but if you did, I imagine they would say, well, it's something he still could work on.
Yeah, I think children and family members teach us a lot about ourselves, provide good feedback.
I remember I was once in a small group discussion with an individual who very, very kind and accomplished gentleman. And at one point he said, one of the things I learned very quickly as a parent is that your kids are like the ugly mirror. They really, you see those things in you see in them those things that you might not have seen in yourself, but that's where they pick up those things. So you certainly do have with your kids an opportunity to get a reflection of not only wonderful, great things, many wonderful, great things that you teach them, but also sometimes our habits get reflected back at us.
That is very true, and I think we should all remember that. Uh,
Yes.
Now, the one thing I've noticed, I've known you for years. You seem to be very humble. Were you always like this, or because you're very accomplished as a surgeon, as an administrator? How much d- did you being a surgeon actually play into who you are today?
Well, let me start with that easier question. How much did me being a surgeon play into being who I am today? I think I became a surgeon because I had aspects to my personality that were really in line with surgery and being a surgeon. And if you ask people, how do medical students choose what specialty they want to be in? The vast majority of us actually choose that based on who we felt the most comfortable with when we are doing our clinical rotations in those third and fourth years, as you know. The people that seemed to be most like us tends to be the single greatest predictor of how you pick a specialty, not necessarily consciously, but that holds true. And so it is true that my personality before I became a surgeon was instrumental in me becoming a surgeon, but by the same token, being a surgeon has had a tremendous impact on who I am as a person, because those two feed off of each other and there's positive feedback loops. So, that's what I would say in regards to that piece. You're very kind in saying those compliments. I would certainly like to be humble, and I think that there's plenty of opportunity for me to continue working on that. But I try to remember every day that there's a lot to learn in life, and I have plenty of things that I can continue to improve about myself. And so you're just trying to be insightful and hear feedback when people are generous enough to give me feedback is important to who I am.
Excellent, very well said. I think we all can learn something from what you just shared with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Of course, you being your true humble self. So, just switching gears a little bit, I was always been curious. Why do surgeons, at least some of them, listen to music when they're performing surgeries? The reason why I'm asking is we invite musicians to contribute to our channel because patients, they've shared with me how much music has meant to them, especially in times where they've faced difficulties as patients. But what is it about music that attracts surgeons to utilize that as a tool while they're performing surgeries?
It's really essential for every surgeon to figure out what it is they need to do to make sure that they're operating at their optimal level. And it is a huge responsibility to make sure that one does what one can to impact that positively. So if any of us were to have surgery, we would expect that the surgeon would have gotten a good night's sleep, that the surgeon certainly not impaired in any way. We would want the surgeon to schedule us at a time when they're at their peak, whether that's at the beginning of the week or the middle of the day or whatever it is. And music is the same kind of thing, right? Some of us work better with music playing in the background, and some of us don't. I worked with a chairman of neurosurgery who needed absolute silence. in the operating room when he was operating. And in contrast, some of the other neurosurgery attendings had music playing in the background. So it really is incumbent upon each physician, each surgeon, to determine what it is that they need to make sure that they're operating at their best. I did listen to music most of the time in the operating room. And the other thing that is important to know is that each person has a different taste, right? So, literally there are some surgeons who want hard rock playing in the background, and others who just want, light classical music and everything in between. I personally tended to, being a child of the 80s, I liked to have 80s playing in the background, 80s music playing in the background. But when things started to get a little bit rocky in an operation, I would ask that the music be turned off, and then I would want silence. I would want that additional focus when things were going off the usual course that they typically would. So it just comes back to what's the right environment for somebody to be as good as they possibly can be. It's also, by the way, why other members of the team deciding to play music without asking the surgeon is something that I wouldn't encourage.
So we're almost at time. So thanks for sharing that. I think music can make a great impact, like you said, for patients, the surgeons, and sometimes the team members as well. Before we part, what are the key lessons that you want to share with the audience as to what you've learned as a surgeon that you apply to your daily life? You shared a glimpse, but what's that one thing that you would want to tell our audience?
We touched on this previously. I think that the amazing resilience of the human is the thing that you get to see as a surgeon in a way that nobody else does. And it's very humbling. It's a real privilege. You see people at their worst, you see people at their best, and oftentimes at exactly the same moment.
That's a very astute observation, and that is like at the same moment.
It's really amazing. Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, I couldn't have thought to end this on a better note. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, and we wish you all the best, and hopefully we'll have you back again.
Thank you, Dr. Bardwaj. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I look forward to connecting again soon.
Likewise.
Take good care.